Hello again, friends. How are you? Kirsten here, and we're recording some new episodes for 2025. Thank you for revisiting some highlights for the past month ish. If you've been with the podcast for a while, then you got to hear some of the greatest hits and some of the most requested. How fun was that? Well, a lot of my clients are longtime podcast listeners, so it was fun to show up in sessions and hear their thoughts on, oh my gosh. So I heard today's episode, which is from 2 years ago, and here are my new thoughts because they heard it 2 years ago. And, we always need to hear the same things over and over again because we're always different, even if the things we hear are the same. So hearing from a new lens can shake things up, be interesting, be useful. It was useful for me personally because I got to spend a lot of time in just thinking about podcast episodes mode. We have some good stuff coming your way. And I will tell you the theme is we're not messing around. Sorry, not sorry. We're not messing around with decision masters this year. Not that we have been, but listen, we're all busy. We have a lot going on. January was a lot. Was it a lot? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but even spilling into February, I feel like, okay, 2025 is bringing a lot to the table. It's giving us a lot of challenges to overcome, a lot of surprises to deal with. Does this speak to the possibility that the rest of the entire year is just going to be smooth sailing and super easy? Maybe. That would be nice. In any case, I want to help you recover from challenges, prepare for the next ones, make it through what you're already going through, love your freaking decisions, and make your life easier. And you know what we don't have time for? A lot of nonsense. We don't have time for putting up with a lot of things that we really don't like, dealing with a lot of people we really don't like, settling for things that we are not happy about, not giving ourselves options to make things better. We don't have time for it. So that's the overarching theme of the podcast for at least the next few months is like, all right, we're not here to mess around. We're also going to make it fun though, because I can't not. There's too many heavy things. So we have our confetti. We're ready. Let's do it. Let's talk about good enough. I think this is a really great starting place, given that you might have also experienced a tough January in whatever form or fashion. And you might be meeting yourself at a moment of diminished energy, lower bandwidth, less resources than you would ideally have. There's this romantic version of a new year where we hit the ground running and we're just like totally motivated and we get to focus on the positives and our goals. You still may be feeling that. If so, hooray, throw some confetti of your own. And you might be tired. You might be a little less amazing feeling than you would prefer right now. So it's extra, extra, extra important for your mental health and for your aligned decision making to define good and good enough for yourself. Because we cannot show up to our day tomorrow with 3 months ago's definition of good enough or 3 years ago's definition of it. We simply have to update these ideas that were only applicable in past circumstances or they were never applicable at all. Personally, I had to redefine a lot of what's a good enough job this week to week this year already, given the surprises and challenges and just new things, one after another. They're still coming as we record this live. So, really being clear that even last week's definition of good enough does not have to apply today. It's saving me a lot of angst. It's saving me a lot of unnecessary self-criticism and judgment. It's saving my brain a lot of angsty, dramatic premonitions of what's going to go wrong in the future because I'm not doing a good enough job today. Again, that's some of that nonsense that we just don't have time for right now. So I'm going to give you a way to think about good and good enough, these very spicy, very prickly concepts of our past that we've probably been struggling with for 1 to 3 decades. And we're going to look at them differently. We're going to look at them in a way that serves you. Normally, when you hear about shifting this mindset or changing your perspective on, I am good enough, I am doing enough, I am doing a good job, you hear the argument for defending why you are good enough. You hear instructions on how to let yourself know, I am good. Here is why this is enough. This rarely works. This approach to changing your perspective from not good enough to good enough is fundamentally flawed because it's rooted in this idea of not good enough. It's coming from the originating perspective of, well, you might not be good enough. Let's see if you can prove that thought wrong. It's almost as if you feel like you're an attorney who's been tasked with defending a client you know is guilty. You actually saw them steal the woman's purse, but you have to walk into that courtroom being like, here's why they're not that bad. And you make this face. You don't super believe it. You don't super believe yourself because you're coming from the mindset of, I already saw what they did. They did it. They're guilty. This is the same attitude we take on about ourselves when we are trying to believe we're good enough. We're trying to convince ourselves we're doing a good job. But we're coming from this background perspective of, I already think you're not good enough, though. I already think you're not doing a good job. I already saw you steal the purse. So rather than instruct you to sit down and write out 5 reasons that you're doing a good job today, here's what I'm going to instruct you to do. I'm going to instruct you to sit down and write out the actual job description you would give yourself for whatever we're talking about. Do you have to sit down and write this out on a piece of paper? No. Can you do this on a dog walk or while you're driving to work, listen to this podcast? Yeah. Make it your own, make it fun. But I want you to think about if you were writing out your job description for being a good friend, parent, spouse, or for doing a good enough job at running your business, directing this show, pitching this project. If you were going to write it out, what do you think good enough is? Or what do you think a good, insert the blank here? What would that be? What would that look like? You get to actually get rid of all of the, is it good enough or is it not noise? And just start from a blank slate. Just start from a clean, fresh perspective. Here is what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you the future. I still want you to do this for yourself because it's very, very valuable to hear your own words on this. But I'm going to tell you what your words are going to be. Here's what your job description is not going to look like. You're not going to write a bulleted out list of being a good blank means never, ever being late, ever, not once. It means always doing more than you're asked every single time, always going above and beyond. It means never, ever causing anyone else any annoyance or discomfort or inconvenience. It means making sure everyone else is always happy. It means making 0 mistakes. It means never trying anything that doesn't work. So never failing. It means never having anything I say land the wrong way. It means never being misunderstood. It means never having an opinion that upsets anyone else. It actually means never doing something that somebody else doesn't like. Always waking up with a lot of energy, never getting sick, never getting distracted, always finishing everything on my list every single day, never feeling off, never needing to slow down, always dropping everything for someone else, regardless of your own needs, and always taking care of yourself completely so that no one else is ever bothered. I'm gonna need you to take a big old deep breath with me right now because that list stressed me out and I wrote it. A helpful exercise as we explore what we do and don't think about good and good enough is imagining what your future self would say. Imagining like wise, sassy, you don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks right now, 75-year-old self. What would she write? What would she have you write as your job description for being a good fill in the blank or doing a good job at fill in the blank? I guarantee 75-year-old wise, sassy you is not putting on the list, never ask for help, but always do extra things for other people, whether they ask for it or not. And don't expect anything in return and definitely don't expect to get paid for it, but be grateful that you're there. Actually, just try to make yourself as small as possible all the time while you're at it. She's not going to write that. What I hope stands out about this absurd job description are the absolutes, the all or nothing, the never and always, and how funny it is. It's like, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, who would ever judge themselves by these standards? Oh, wait, hold on. Hang on 1 second. Have we been judging ourselves by these standards? Whoopsies. But no, Kirsten, I'm not saying I never should make a mistake. I just shouldn't have made that one big giant mistake. But it's okay to make mistakes, just not that one. I hear you. I see you. I'm not buying it. Listen, if this list is absurd to you, if this job description of this all or nothing, always never person is absurd to you, then you have total permission to laugh at your own judgments and self criticisms and the standards you're holding yourself to, because you didn't think of that on purpose. Wake up today being like, you know what? I'm just going to go ham on judging any mistake that I make. That's going to feel good and it's a good idea. No, you didn't wake up that way. You woke up with the habits in your body. You woke up with the patterns in your head that you woke up with today. And we can laugh at it. We can actually laugh at, wow, I am judging myself by these standards of a non existent person. Delightful. When you laugh at it, you break the cycle of always making yourself wrong or right. Because when we get mad at ourselves for having these patterns and habits to begin with, that's where we just kind of put ourselves in the dryer and tumble around. We're like, well, I'm not doing that right either. Add it to the list. So we have to laugh. And then we have to get actually real with ourselves about what is the job description? How do I want to define a good enough job or a good friend or a good blah, blah, blah? And you can update this yearly, quarterly, weekly if you are in the shenanigans show that is 2025 so far. Fundamentally, I don't believe that your definition of being a good friend is going to change week to week to week, or a good spouse, or a good parent, or a good child, or a good sibling. I actually think your definition of being a good person is a lot more zoomed out than you're giving yourself credit for. I think if you wrote down, what do I actually think would make me a good friend? It would not be scenario specific. It would not be the all or nothing absurdity of, yeah, just drop everything every single time anybody wants anything from you, no matter what's going on in your life. It wouldn't be that because that's absurd. We all agree. And it wouldn't be, well, this week, since this person is asking this of me, then to be a good person, I need to acquiesce to their request. I promise if you think about this, you're going to find a lot more flexibility and it might surprise you. Your definition of being a good spouse or a good neighbor isn't going to be itemized. Well, you're only a good spouse if you take the trash out every Tuesday. No, we got to get our wide lens out here and look at over time. If these are the trends that we see in your behavior, if this is your attitude towards yourself and others, that will, by your own definition, make you a good fill in the blank person. This wide lens can help you make easier decisions about what is good enough this week. If your life is changing day to day and your circumstances are giving you new challenges all the time, if you know being a good business owner does not actually hinge on showing up to send an email every Thursday by 8 a.m., or you're not doing a good job, then you have more flexibility and you get to take your real life context into account when you decide what's good enough this week. And you actually get to have this conversation with yourself where you say no. Just because we're not recording a live podcast this week for the first time in 2 years doesn't mean we're not showing up doing a good job. I actually get to decide that that doesn't mean that. You get to decide, I'm taking all of the things into account right now, and I'm going to decide that I'm not going to. The example coming to mind right now is help my friend move, but I don't really have friends who are asking for help moving anymore. But back in the day, you would get asked. I got asked a fair amount. Did you? I don't know. But I feel like that was we moved a lot and we were scrappy. So, but if you're asked something or hosting the thing for your kid's class for the school, you get to decide. Being a good parent doesn't require me to say yes to hosting this thing for my kid's class this weekend. I get to say no to that thing I don't want to do, and I don't have to make it mean I'm doing a bad job. This is not about letting yourself off the hook. It's about updating your own definitions because we keep showing up as if our job description is all or nothing. It's absolutes. But if that's not the way you would assign yourself that job, if you were just stepping into it for the first time today, then we can't use those standards anymore. And it's really not about letting yourself off the hook, because when you have this all or nothing thinking clouding your judgment, you actually miss when you are really not doing a good job according to your own standards. It's very hard for you to discern, does this make me a bad friend? Does this make me a bad business owner? When your mind is going back and forth between all these all or nothings, like you have to do this or you're terrible, you always have to do that or you're worthless. How are you going to know what's really important, what really makes the difference when you have all that noise in your head? Got to clean it up. I have one caveat I want you to be aware of as you shift your definitions of good and good enough. These patterns run deep. These habit canyons are deep, deep grooves in your brain, and it can be difficult to see things differently overnight. It's not impossible. My hope is if you are in a place where you can hear this and have an aha, you do get to show up to your life with an entirely different perspective tomorrow. And you get to hear these conversations with yourself of saying, actually, no, being a good blank means this, which doesn't require me to do XYZ 10 times out of 10 perfectly, A plus. So you do get to have a different conversation with yourself tomorrow about, I'm going to say yes to this and I'm not going to make it mean I'm doing a bad job. I'm in charge. But I just want to make it okay if there is still a strong voice in your head that says, no, you do need to go above and beyond. You do need to be overworked and underpaid. That's how you do a good enough job. If you don't really believe that deep, deep, deep down in your core, or you don't really want to believe that, but it still feels 99% true, we're going to shake that off. We're going to breathe. We're going to let that be okay. Remember what I always say, something feeling true usually just means it feels familiar. And that makes so much sense here, right? If you spent the last 30 years repeating this rule to yourself of to be a good this, I need to do this. And if I do this, it means I'm a bad this. That's going to be difficult to believe yourself when you say, no, no, it's okay. Just don't do that thing. You're fine. So give yourself some grace and let it be a process. The hardest thing about mental habit change, which is mindset change, is deciding what you want to think. It's very challenging a lot of the time. We can really wholly believe things, but we can see clearly how they don't serve us and they don't make sense and we don't like them. And it can still feel really impossible to think anything differently. So I want you to be your own advocate. Let it be okay if it feels impossible to believe that I can not stay up all night working on this thing and I can still believe I'm doing a good enough job. And let it be uncomfortable. And if you need help, then by all means, reach out to me or whoever you want to get help from and get help. There are professionals whose whole job is to help you make it easier to change the way you see the world and treat yourself. So we're here. You don't have to do this alone. I feel like it's been a long time since we talked to each other. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to hang out all day long. Can we? No? Okay. Well, thanks for being here for this time. And I really am curious what you think of this whole defining good enough for yourself, and letting go of this kind of defense attorney mentality where you feel like you're constantly justifying your goodness to yourself, but yourself doesn't fully believe it. I'm hoping we can turn that on its head today and then make it easier for the rest of time for you to just stop having this conversation every single day with yourself. Am I good? Am I good enough? Am I doing a good enough job? Like, nonsense we don't have time for. But I know it's also important to us that we are good and doing a good enough job. Okay, I am working with people one-on-one again. I have a limited number of spots for these individual weekly client sessions, but this 3 months we could spend together is such a transformative time where you can really change the way you think, start making decisions differently, putting yourself first, getting clear on what you want in life, getting clear on what you want to believe, what you don't want to believe anymore. If you want to grab up one of these spots, you can always book a consult, kirstenparker.com/schedule. Let's just do it. Let's stop waiting. Let's make 2025 the year of no nonsense and putting yourself first and feeling good about your choices. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I'm excited to talk to you again next week. Bye.
Hey, want to find out your decision style? Obviously, go take the decision style quiz. It's in the show notes and at kirstenparker.com/quiz. We all have our style when it comes to making decisions, but do you know how to use your default way of thinking to your advantage? Or do you mainly get stuck in the most annoying parts of overthinking and people pleasing? The decision style quiz has your answers, my friend. Take it right now at kirstenparker.com/quiz.